Well, hello there to I'm going to call it a special edition of Gene and
Special
Roger Talk
edition
Movies,
for
right?
sure, yeah.
Because we're doing the movie Bad Bones today, and we are graced by director Scott Eggleston and actress Danielle Rabinovitch to talk about this film. So let's
Yes, who of course were in Bad Bones.
let's get right into it. Gene, give us a synopsis of what goes on in this film.
Well, it seems like I don't know. When I watched this movie, there were a lot of like thoughts in my mind. You know, it's definitely like a haunted house genre kind of movie. But yeah, it was shot in a local neighborhood, and so it's had that local flair. You know, it made me thinking, it was like, do I know that neighborhood? You know, yeah. No, I think it's okay. I'll just give it away. It's Anchorage. We live up in Anchorage. But yeah, it's made me thinking about haunted house. But there are some parts that were kind of tough to follow. Like there's a part with apples, which I don't know, I watched it a couple times, but I don't know if I still really quite got it. But then...
I got it, Gene.
Oh, you did? Okay, thanks. You can help me out.
Yeah, I can.
But then it seemed like it involved not a haunted house, but maybe a haunted neighborhood. So maybe it made me think that this movie was kind of like a Stepford Wives kind of take, you know, like where men were trying to have the perfect women that they could dominate. And certainly I think the main character in the movie seems Russell. He is kind of like that kind of domineering kind of guy, and he wants his women, it seems, to be a certain way and to fill a certain role and stay in their lane. Because towards the end of the movie, she gets out of her lane, and he doesn't like it very much. So, yeah, I think there's a lot going on, but yeah.
I agree. There's definitely, because I've watched it twice, and the first time I had one view of this film, and then the second time I was seeing a lot more of what the director, Scott, was trying to accomplish here with this film. Scott, what was kind of your inspiration for this film, and kind of what led you to go this route?
Well, this movie was kind of the product of getting to know certain actors here. I worked on a movie, one with Danielle, actually, and then a previous one with an actor whose name's Chris Levine, on a movie called Woods of Ash, which is supposed to be out this year, I believe. Anyway, it was, I was living in Kotzebue for 4.5 years, and being a
Alaska.
film, yes. Is there another Kotzebue? I don't know. And I'd come from grad school studying film, and I tried to get some kind of film project going up there. I'd done a lot of YouTube stuff, but I was trying to get short film, anything off the ground in Kotz, and I never really could. So when I ended up in Anchorage, I was really eager to work on a project, any project. And so I ended up meeting with this local director. His name's Joe Hamilton. And we had I put a bunch of feelers out on Facebook saying, hey, let's do a film, talk about film, anything. And Joe was the only one that came to every meeting. And so he had produced a movie here previously called No Way Out, also with Chris Levine. And I ended up working on this movie, Woods of Ash, with Chris again. And we hit it off. We talked about doing a project together, and he said, "Yeah, that's great, but I only make features, and I had only done shorts." And so he said, "When you have a script or something, let me know, and we'll." He was from L.A. and we'll come down, blah blah blah. So I just thought about, and then I worked on another movie with Chris that Danielle was in called "I Die You Live," which is also in post production. Anyway, so while I was working on this movie, Joe had all this like property up in Point McKenzie that he had leased as kind of a back lot, and that's where he makes his movies. And I thought, well, what do I have? I'm a trained filmmaker. What can I do? I should be doing the same exact thing. And so I thought, well, I have a house here in Anchorage. And
was that the house?
It's the house, yes.
It's the house.
We shot the movie in is my house.
All right.
And the house has a giant crawl space under it. So
I could tell.
Yeah. Those actually are the same. All the geography in the movie is exactly how it is in real life. There's no like split locations or anything. It's the same house. Yeah. And so, you ask yourself as a filmmaker or a writer, like, what kind of movie would you make if you had a giant crawl space under your house? It's so tall enough that I can stand up in it. I'm 6'7", so it's huge. Maybe it kind of defies the definition of a crawl space, but it's under the house. It's
tall,
big. Yeah, you can fit a lot of people down there, actors, crew, and so being kind of a closet horror fan, like I've never been an outright horror fan, but I appreciate a good movie, and it's a horror movie. And so this movie, had some obvious influences: Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Pet Sematary. You mentioned Stepford Wives. That's definitely in there. And so I got together with two of my buddies from grad school who live in the South. One of them is in Arkansas, one of them is in Louisiana, and we wrote the script online basically together. We collaborated on the outline, and I ended up writing the whole thing. And so, yeah, that was kind of the basic conception of it.
Yeah, because welcome to low-budget filmmaking, right? Not only are you the director, right? You're credited as the editor, credited as the story writer, and
true.
all sorts of stuff.
Producer,
Yeah, and so that's just kind of the deal. You have this vision and this idea of, hey, I want to get this film out there. Well, I got to just pretty much do everything to make it happen, you know?
Yeah.
And so, Gene, I am going to point out a few things about this film that I think maybe you missed a little bit, because I do like how the Chris Levine character, he plays Russell. Basically, the storyline is he and his wife move into this house.
Right.
Russell is a paranormal author, best-selling author.
And it seemed like things had to be arranged to live in, quote unquote, that house.
Right. And so his publisher,
so there's something up with this house.
He right away knows that there's something going on in this house or with this house.
Right.
But his wife is coming off of a coma, and it's unclear what the disease is, but it's definitely
terminal.
Definitely terminal and end-of-life type disease she's on.
She's going to die.
Right. And so there's sequences at the beginning where he's legitimately loves his wife and is actually trying, I think, to help her. That's why he's moved into this house. He's trying to figure out, is there anything within this house that could maybe alleviate her suffering from this disease? And so I think that's why I think this movie's a little smarter than others, because I truly believe legitimately he wants to make his wife better. There's a great scene midway through this film where the wife is basically saying, you know, Russell, you're gonna have to let me go.
Yeah,
and then they're
outside on the little.
And then he is saying that he's basically not ready for that to happen, right?
Right.
And so he's in there trying to figure out a way to bring her back to full health. And it's only later that he kind of turns into this weirder character, like you're saying. So I like the way his character works there.
Yeah, I kind of got the sense that he was that kind of weird guy from the very beginning.
Okay. All right.
Because
weird guy,
well, the not very sensitive person, because right at the beginning of the movie, right, they have a conversation with the wife. They're at the table, and she makes peanut butter jelly sandwiches for them for lunch. And then he's like, oh, did you eat your sandwich? And she's like, no, I wasn't hungry. Well, you should eat. And, you know, he's really treating her like a child, you know, I think trying to, put her in her place.
I think that, though, I mean, you could go that route with it, but I also think it was more of, honey, you've got to eat. You've got to do this stuff to keep your strength up, to kind of beat this disease that you can't win the game with, right, is kind of the way I was looking at that.
Okay.
So welcome to Gene and Roger Disagree.
Yes, yeah.
Many interpretations possible.
Yeah, well,
from
and
this movie in general.
That's the great thing.
Yeah, as the guys who made the movie, what was like? Is there a correct interpretation?
No.
For that, okay.
I mean, I have an idea, of course, when you write the thing, but
right. Yeah.
But this is, as you probably noticed, and it's kind of open-ended in certain ways, and I don't lay it all out on purpose. Because I do try and assume that my audience is intelligent, and I don't want to spoon feed him or hit him over the head or.
Right.
No, conversely, I mean that a lot of people don't like that. I mean, you know, some people want everything spelled out completely, and that's not the case here. So. Well,
and I think horror movie fans, I think we appreciate films like this where, it's not spelling it out. This isn't some big budget Hollywood movie where they have to tell us everything, right?
Yeah. No. I like that. It's where you can. You look at the clues provided and you come up with your own,
But I think this movie really takes off because at the beginning there's just setting the stage for the relationship between the man and his wife. But then the wife character, Jennifer, decides, hey, I'm going to maybe make some friends over here in the neighborhood, so I'm going to make some cookies. And I'm going to walk across the street and knock on my neighbor's door. And that's the first appearance of Danielle, your character, Jen. And I will tell you, and I spoke about this a minute ago too, but the second your character comes on screen, this movie, in my opinion, kind of elevates itself and starts to take off because your interpretation of that next door neighbor is amazing because you think when you go over to visit a neighbor, it's going to be this pleasant interaction. And from the moment your character comes on screen, it's like you're off a little bit. There's something off with you. What kind of led you to do the character in that way? Did Scott give you specific direction to do that, or did you just be like, this is how I see this character?
Well, thank you. And yes, I mean, it's pretty clear in the script that something is off, I think. And she's not, she's annoyed. It's not in a pleasant manner that she's welcoming this neighbor.
Yeah, it was definitely out of the ordinary.
Well,
yes.
but I love the way you grabbed the plate and you just shoved a cookie in your mouth. I love that. And was that just a spur of the moment, this is how this character would act, or was that also in the script?
I think that was kind of collaborative.
I don't recall.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I told you to go and just start eating in front of her. I think that is actually in the script, where you start eating the cookies while you're talking and
I
sort of dismiss her. And
it is written in the script there that to start eating some cookies, but I think the level of, aggression is the wrong word, but
I think
she's kind of a bee. I mean,
I think that was the direction I gave you, right? Because you kind of started at a certain level, and I said more, keep going up. And
I think I started even more dismissive, but more nonchalant. Mm-hmm. And then Scott said, I need you to really be a bee. And I was like, oh, I can do that. And so then the next one, all right, great. Perfect.
Well, and then I love, of course, you give a huge line of dialogue there where you basically just blurt out, oh, do you realize the people that lived in there before just up and disappeared one day?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, yep, that's the crazy next door neighbor there, right?
Yeah,
and
a little quirky.
Yeah, and it to me then that kind of brings the movie up a notch, and then it kind of just stays there for the rest of the film, and I think you were the catalyst to kind of get it up to that level just with that character. Cause,
I would agree with that. Like up to that point, you're just kind of rolling with the movie. But then you're introduced, and all of a sudden it's not. It's kind of off. It's a very unexpected reaction. So it's like,
she's just got a plate of cookies she's bringing over.
It's like, okay, so here we are. All right, what's going to happen next?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
certainly raises an eyebrow of, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And, a lot of people comment about that scene. That's a lot of people love that character, and they love that scene, and they mention it all the time, like you guys just did, about how pivotal it is to the story or how interesting she is.
Yeah.
Because it is kind of out of the blue. And we knew when we were writing that scene, like, this is a good character, and we actually ended up putting her in the movie more because we liked that character. So.
Well, and it's funny because I was telling this to Gene. We don't usually talk about the movies before we do the podcast, but there's a knock on the door of the main character's house later in the film, and it turns out to be the
realtor.
Jennifer's mother.
Oh, the mother.
And I was like, when that knock happens and Chris's character is like, oh, I got to go get the door. I was like, oh, I hope it's her bringing the plate back.
You bring the plate back.
But there's a reason you don't see her again until later.
Yes, we can get into that.
Yeah, that wouldn't make any sense if she brought the cookies
no,
back.
No,
right.
Definitely.
Kind of ruined though. Yeah.
Right. You don't realize that until later, but character is very pivotal. And so as we go along, right away, Chris has been digging through this house. He knows something is going on in this house.
You mean Russell?
Chris Levine playing Russell.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And then he goes down into the crawl space and he finds something down there. And he pulls out this piece of paper, and I don't remember the exact word that's on that piece. Is it azote?
Azote, A-Z-O-T-E. Like somehow he connects them, or like he was expecting it to be there, because he brought that, like he had it with him, and he matched up the symbol on that was under the visqueen on the floor, and he matched it up with that symbol. And I haven't looked up what this means, but
so
like
I did, of course, because I'm like,
yeah.
okay, is that in one of my witchy books or something like that? Well, what I found was if you break it down far enough in the language chain, it basically can translate to the inability to sustain life. Is that accurate?
My understanding of that term was that it was an archaic usage of nitrogen.
Yes.
It was before they, I guess, had the term nitrogen. They used this term. So
it's like a fertilizer, something that actually
possibly
helps things grow.
Well, and it's weird because when
see
I
it
was
that way,
when
yeah.
I was going further down, if you look at the French and Greek with this, it's the inability to sustain life. So I think either thing works. The fertilizer idea certainly works in this movie.
It does work, yeah.
But the inability to sustain life also works because what happens when you leave the property line?
Right.
Your body falls apart and you kind of just turn
Or
into
you
goo.
actually,
Right.
it seems, yeah.
And so, yeah, I just thought that was interesting. I love little things like that in movies like this where, okay, what does that mean? How does that connect? And we've got two different interpretations there.
Yeah, and I like that there was like in this crawl space, it looked like a previous owner had put up like a false wall, which of course Russell penetrates to get to this azote.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's like Russell is all doing explorer mode, Raiders of the Lost Ark archaeologist mode, and he finds this thing in his basement. Yeah.
Well, and even earlier, there's an earlier scene when Jennifer is outside, and there's a shot right on the crawl space vent that leads to the outside, which you can clearly see has been,
It's been
spray
sealed.
foam sealed.
Yes,
you know,
but
so
sealed off, right?
somebody knew that, okay, there's some bad stuff going on in there,
Yeah,
so
they were
let's
trying to
seal
seal
that
it
off.
off, yeah.
But Chris, being the paranormal investigator, he's got to figure it out. So.
Yeah. Did you add that half wall for the movie, or was it? Done?
yes, we did.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know how much people would enjoy smashing through the wall to get in there, but yeah, because I was definitely wanting to question about that crawl space because it almost looked like a set to me because it's not your normal crawl space. But you're saying no, that's actually the real deal.
Yeah, it's and the house we learned later was kind of weirdly constructed. Like it doesn't have a cement foundation. It's kind of built on these steel columns. And so, yeah, so it was really unusual. But as far as that wall goes, I was actually, when I was writing the script, a friend of mine at work, because I was sharing the kind of basic story, and he essentially suggested, you should put a wall down there and knock it down. And I was like, well, that's an awesome idea. Doesn't cost very much. I had a friend who did drywalling, and he just came over. I bought all the materials, and he did it, put it up in in a couple hours, and that kind of stuff is cheap and easy. It just adds production value, right? I mean, as you saw the shots, I mean, it's, you're really putting a sledgehammer through a wall, and that's
Yeah,
Right,
Yes,
and
yeah.
that was a great shot too because it's from the outside of the wall, and then you see the sledge coming through there, and that's
Yeah, and
that
it
was
just gives out that something is being purposely hidden.
Right, right.
Yeah. But I kept wondering, as Russell kept going into this room, is that, as somebody who does the do-it-yourself projects at my house, is like, why did you just cut the opening bigger so you didn't have to duck?
Oh. Yeah, well, there's an I-beam actually running through the center of that. And we can't really see it. But, because another question you could ask is why didn't you just sledge it out at eye level or something? But the set literally does not allow because there is this big I-beam. It's probably 3 feet off the ground running across the center of the crawl space. And then there's some 2x4 frame on top of it. So that's what we built the wall on top of. But
nice.
yeah,
Well, it's always scarier to have to crawl into
Yeah,
into the
exactly.
place where
yeah,
the
that's
evil
true.
is,
That's true.
right?
Also
Than
true.
just
Yeah,
walk
I
in.
think it worked out. I think it worked out okay.
Oh yeah,
But-
It did,
no,
yeah.
it's
So-
perfectly fine. And so, as we're going along in this movie, though, first of all, there's also this big mirror down there, and then there's a
Yes.
chair across from the mirror.
Both were actually under the house.
Oh, nice. When
Yeah,
you
I
moved in?
didn't- Yes.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, there's your
Sure.
horror movie right
Exactly.
there.
I mean, it writes itself, right?
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Yeah.
But as we go
Okay.
along, and then of course there's an extensive amount of time spent with these apples, and so Russell puts an apple down there on that azote area, and then it appears to come back up the stairs, and there's a lot
There's
of
a basket of apples on the dining room table. He gets one, puts it on the azote, and then I don't know if it dissolves right away, but then he notices. Then he comes back up, and it seems like the basket full of apples has been replenished.
right, and so he
Yeah.
ends up doing a lot of experiments with these apples to
Yeah.
try to figure out what exactly is happening. At one point, he even bites into the apple and realizes, okay, that doesn't taste very good, so you're laying the groundwork for whatever this thing is recreating or doppelganging or whatever you want to call it. there's something off about
Yeah,
it.
he seems to go through the scientific method. Like he
Did-
arranges an experiment. I like how you set it up where he arranges the apples in a row, like there's 7
Yeah.
of them. Yeah.
I was going to ask if when he bites into the apple, that was actually a reference to another horror movie. I don't know if you caught it or not, but
Oh, now
Oh,
you're testing.
yeah.
You're
Oh my
testing Gene and
gosh.
Roger talk
Oh,
movies
yes.
here. So
Biting into an apple and it doesn't
Oh,
taste.
my.
but it wasn't an apple. It was another duplicated item that didn't taste correct.
Oh man, whatever the movie is, I'm sure I've seen it.
Yes, you have.
Scott, help us
Oh.
out.
Everybody- It's from The Fly. When he copies the steak in the
Right.
teleporter,
Yeah, and he
and then
goes,
she tastes it,
Yeah,
and she
yeah.
says something's weird. It tastes synthetic, I think is what she
Yep.
says.
This
Yeah.
is in the remake of The Fly.
Yeah,
Yes, the
remake.
1987.
David
Okay.
Cronenberg.
Yep.
Cronenberg, yeah.
so-
There's some body horror elements in this movie, so definitely some
Yeah.
Cronenbergian influences.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, he makes some pretty nauseating movies, I have to admit, but they're all incredibly compelling.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and
So-
I don't know about Gene, but Roger certainly loves David Cronenberg. So
I think during that moment, for me specifically, I took more of the symbolism of the tree of knowledge, and here's
course.
these apples, and I mean,
Yeah, it's
Oh,
not an
yeah, yeah.
accident that we used apples, right? I mean,
Exactly,
and-
yeah.
right, and that's again another example of how horror movies can have all these different interpretations and symbolisms and things like that, which is why we just place these horror movies on a pedestal because they're smart.
we like 'em.
you know. But he ends up quartering one of the apples
Yeah.
and throws it down there. And then what happens? Oh, there's 4 smaller versions of this apple.
Yeah,
that come
4
up there.
apples appear. Right.
So then you
Right.
kind of have an idea that this thing can start recreating whatever you place down there.
Yeah, you can create a hole from a part. Yeah.
Right, and meanwhile, his wife, Jennifer, is kind of talking about some of these nightmares she's been having. You know, about how I am down in the crawl, or I'm looking down in the crawl space, and you're down there with some other girl, maybe. And they make a big deal about how Jennifer has a tattoo on her ankle, and I
Yeah,
see
you
this-
definitely go out of your way to show the
Mhm.
tattoo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And-
Sorry.
No, no.
Obnoxious close up, right?
Yeah, that's all. Yeah.
Well, and that's setting it up for, because later, as the Jennifer character starts coming back after dying and being placed down there and coming back, well, what's happened? Her tattoo has gone away.
The
And
tattoo
I did want,
disappears.
I'm glad that the director, Scott, is here today, because my interpretation of what was going on there as the Jennifer character keeps coming back is this entity, in your mind, was this entity trying to purify this person and remove disease and other impurities on this person, which would explain why she feels better? It's almost like the entity or the house
Right.
has
She
cured
wants
her.
to go running.
And then is like,
Yeah.
okay, this tattoo is also an invasive thing on your body, so I'm removing that. Were you going in that direction? Because it also seemed like her personality was being changed as well.
Well, I really don't want to say this is exactly what I meant. I mean, but what
Yeah.
you're getting out of it is what I was intending. I mean,
Okay. Oh, I'm smart.
I mean, I admit I'm not a huge fan of like puzzle box movies that are so impenetrable, like you don't know what's going on. I think I had to kind of walk a tightrope here as far as
Yeah.
giving out enough information to where it was, in my mind, was clear what was happening, but not so much that it was like hitting you over the head with, hey, dummy, the characters are not going to stand around and repeat what just happened that we all saw.
Right.
That kind of thing. But I think there's enough clues out there that like you're gathering, both of you, gathering all the information, that I've laid out there that I think is fairly obvious.
Yeah.
It's just not overt.
No, and it's
So-
interesting because on the first viewing of this film, I didn't necessarily catch all of that stuff, and it was only on the second viewing where I was like, oh, this is what's going on. Because you do leave all these kind of subtle clues throughout this film as to what's really going on. Even with the first reincarnation of the Jennifer character, you don't actually see him put her down there or anything. It's just one day she's feeling fine. And so something had occurred there where he had gotten her down there.
Yeah.
But one of the things that does set this all up, which we glossed over, was there's a sequence where Russell is down in the crawl space and he cuts himself or gets cut somehow.
Yeah.
Maybe the entity or the house itself cuts him. And so his blood goes into the
Yeah,
azote
and I
thing.
like how his blood got on the azote and it steamed. So
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah. And so then he walks upstairs later And what does he find in his bed, sleeping right next to his wife? Him, his
Yeah,
doppelganger.
Was his wife there?
Yeah, his wife is right there. I watched it twice. I saw the
Okay,
scene.
all right.
Yeah, and so he drags
Yeah,
that
his own body. Yeah.
body out of there, and this is where you also get the first indication. Well, actually, the second indication that you got to be in this property line because he drives his own body off to dispose of it.
Yeah,
And
I
that-
love how he, like he thinks he's going to get away with this, but I don't know. Maybe in Anchorage you could. I don't know.
Broad daylight.
In broad daylight,
Dumpster.
yeah.
Yeah.
It just goes up to a random dumpster and just opens the hatch of his car and, I'm going to throw this body in there.
Yeah.
But then the body pops inside the.
Yeah, well, I think he knows that there's not going to be any evidence, right? I mean,
Mhm.
from what like you said, his experimentation with the apples, he knows that
Yeah.
there's probably not going to be anything left to incriminate him with.
Right, because the apple had dissolved before.
Right, and was
Yeah.
that a CGI apple dissolving there, or how did you do that?
That was a
effect?
practical apple,
Practical
Roger.
effect.
Yes.
Very nice.
Yeah. Eric White, who's one of my friends from grad school, who I wrote this story with, was kind of the practical effects wizard of the movie. And actually, the funny thing about that shot that you're seeing of the apple doing its thing is in Arkansas.
Oh,
Nice.
And of course, Chris is here in Alaska. It's just one of those, it's all editing. And the shots are married together, and you can't tell.
yeah,
But
it's a close-up of
but
the apple.
he came up with the idea of basically taking a fake apple. It was like a kind of a styrofoam-filled apple, I think, and he hollowed it out and then pressurized it with like the substance was hair conditioner. And he, I think, pressurized it with kind of one of your like the canisters that you'd use for insecticide kind of thing, and pumped it up, and then it would just as you see, it starts to leak first, and then it pops.
Right.
And it's glued to the road apparently, so it can't go anywhere until the actual. So anyway, he went through several iterations of that, sent me a
Nice.
bunch of them, and then there's some slight masking and things like that to hide the tubes and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was not CGI. There are some CGI effects in the movie, but that's
Yeah.
not one of them.
Yeah, I'm sure
So.
Jennifer's face was not actually melting.
You are correct.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
right on your doorstep.
Yeah.
We only get one take for that one, so do it right.
Yeah,
Did we? Well, have you screaming? No, we had several screams, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Very good screamer, Danielle.
Yeah.
I asked her,
Thank
can you
you.
give me a blood-curdling scream? And she said, yes, I
Oh
can.
yeah, no, Danielle is
Yeah.
definitely designed for horror films.
Yeah, I was
That
trying to-
scream certainly worked.
I was trying to keep track of the
Thank you,
different.
question mark?
Yeah, I was trying to keep track of the different versions of Jen. And it seems like she died 3 times. So, but I think the second time was she was your house, and then she dies. She starts melting right on your doorstep.
Right, because
Yeah.
there is the sequence where she does run across the street and she's pounding on Jen's door, and this is the second time we see Danielle in the frame. And I loved, again, how you actually entered the frame, because I don't know if you remembered or not, but the way it's shot, you almost come in sort of like snake-like, almost like, who's bothering me down there? And again, immediately it's like, okay, here's this off-putting woman again, and then you come down the stairs, open the door, and then this is where you see kind of what happens, or what begins to happen when somebody leaves that property line, because Jennifer's face is kind of distorted and kind of melting away, and that's when you let out the blood-curdling scream.
Yeah. She has all the time in the world and nothing to do, but doesn't want to be bothered,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and so you I don't know if it was 3 times or maybe more, but again, each
It could
time
have been more, but I
each
noticed
time
3
that
times.
personality kind of changes, and I.
She seems to get more edgy as she's reincarnated.
Well,
She
it's
used that phrase more.
it's weird because the first reincarnation of her was more like, okay, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling healthy. The
Yeah.
second one was more.
I think that's after she wants to go running.
The second one was more, almost
Like playful?
playful and
Like when they're playing frisbee outside?
and well, no,
Yeah.
that
That was the Frisbee scene.
yeah.
Frisbee scene.
But there was
In
the
your
one.
backyard.
In my backyard,
Yeah.
yes.
There's
Love
the
it.
one where they're laying in bed, and it's really the first indication that I had anyway that Chris was maybe kind of becoming less excited about his plan of maybe trying to bring her back, because at that time it was like, okay, the woman that I married and loved is now gone through
Right.
multiple changes, and she's trying to relay this story about their camping trip or whatever, and she's not remembering all of the information that was accurate in this story, but she's also kind of being, I'm going to say frisky. It's not a word I use too often, but she clearly is
Frisky.
that, and he is no longer really interested at all.
Well, she's clearly changing.
Mhm.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, and then later as we go, she gets more combative and aggressive with her behaviors. Like,
Yeah, I kind of think that as she gets, to use those phrases, more combative and aggressive. I
Mhm.
think, as a viewer, I kind of like her more,
mhm.
because she's kind of standing up to this Russell character who, like I said before, I kind of didn't like from the very get-go. So I like that she's kind of standing up to him.
Well, but go ahead, Scott.
I was just going
Yeah.
to say we should add this is a Madison Bullock playing
yeah.
Jen, who does a really good job. I mean, because that's
Yes,
it's
she
actually
does
a
a good
lot to
job.
load onto an actor as far as like, okay, you're going to be playing this one person who is very different throughout the movie. You
Mhm.
change. I mean, I think I don't know. Maybe Danielle can pipe up about whether actors like that kind of a role instead of just maybe playing the baseline the whole entire time. Or
I mean, I can't speak for Madison specifically, but generally I would say, yeah, it's great to have a character where you can really play around and try different things, even from take to take. But to show that many different colors, and we have that, different levels of like the innocence, and then being bold, and then finding that, having more independence, having more strength, seeing all those different levels, I think gives the character not only more of an overall arc, but just, moment to moment more interesting to be able to play with different colors, certainly.
yeah, I agree. It's fun to write those kind of parts too. And to both of Chris and Madison's credit, this isn't apparent in the movie, but they were both like really sick the whole time.
Yeah.
They both showed up from LA and were immediately sick.
Really
Yeah.
interesting.
Never really don't know what it was. Was it COVID? I don't know. But Madison actually lost her voice halfway through the shoot.
Right, and I
And-
love that because the mother character actually brings that up, and I thought, oh, is she legitimately sick here? And they're just trying to cover that. Oh, your
Yeah.
voice has changed and all this stuff,
Yeah.
but it plays in with the fact that you're getting kind of reincarnated by this house, this entity, and maybe one of the things it does is you have a scratchy voice.
So I guess a nuts and bolts question. Then the movie was shot about the summer of 2021.
Yes.
Okay.
Get the year right. Yeah, it was July, end of July, I think
July.
we started. And it was a 10-day shoot, so everyone was there for. Well, actually, we had the actors, the two leads, Chris and Madison, and we had the sound guy, and my two friends from grad school came up, and we were all living in the house
Yeah, nice.
to save money, obviously. And then Danielle and just some crew members that were local, so they didn't have to stay in the house, but they were
Yeah.
close enough to where they could drive there.
Right.
Robin Thompson, who played the mom, and Jamie Nelson played Will, the publisher.
Will,
So
yeah,
they were all
right.
local actors. I think Jamie was the farthest away. I think he lives in Kenai. But,
Okay.
yeah. But I tried to get as many local people involved as possible.
No, that's great. And-
Just a 10-day shoot.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
it
that's
was.
awesome.
I wouldn't do that again. And this is actually, I actually took the model from Joe, who I'd worked with twice.
Mm-hmm.
But you need a break in the middle there. I think
Mhm.
it's pretty hard.
So you're
on
saying 10
everybody.
days is too intense. So
Without a break, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and so, but there's a shot right at the beginning of the film that sets up the stage for the fact that there's something going in this house, which was clearly filmed in the winter, and so when did you do that shot?
Yeah, the very intro shot. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I was putting it together in post. I realized that, as you point out, like nothing really happens genre-wise until probably like this. Well, till the Jenna scene, and then Russ immediately goes into the crawl space right after that scene. So I wanted something off the top, like prologue-y kind of thing that would sort of hook the audience, or because, I mean, especially in the TikTok, YouTube era, that I was worried I was going to lose people if they weren't willing to hang around and watch these characters, which they should anyway. And a lot of great movies obviously don't have hook. I mean, Alien is a good example.
Right.
There's no hook at the beginning of Alien. The facehugger doesn't show up until
Right.
30 minutes in.
Right.
But I still wanted to do something, and plus it also, again, it's one of those things you can do that's inexpensive and it adds scope to your movies. Shoot a scene in a different season, And then when you cut, to the present day or whatever, then it's obviously everything's, it's months later.
Right.
Time passes without you having to, slap a date on the screen,
Right.
which I hate.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know.
A lot of movies do
Well,
that,
and
yeah.
we should
So-
point out too, because there's multiple scenes in this film where characters decide it's time for bed, but it's complete blazing daylight out. And so in Alaska, just for those of you who don't know, during the summer, there are places here in Alaska where the sun does not set at all, and so don't think that's a continuity mistake or anything like that.
Yeah, no, it really happens.
It can be 11 o'clock at night and it's still daylight out, and you're
Yeah,
going
and
to
it's-
bed.
and it's
so-
bright daylight.
Which
yeah.
is also nice when you're shooting a movie because you're
Right,
daylight
yeah.
hangs around. As long,
Right.
I was at writing this, I started writing night scenes, and I realized, wait a minute, I'm going to be shooting this in July. There's no night.
No night, right.
So I either have to fake it and cause a bunch of technical issues, or I'll just write it into the story. And so I wish I would have been more specific about maybe where they were, but there is one line that he says,
Yes.
and that's the only line. But it's funny because when we did the live premiere, everybody snickered in the audience about that line when he's complaining, about I don't know how you get any sleep here with the sun out all the time, and even though I
Right,
kind of cheat later, like you mentioned, the sun going down at 11, and he's driving around at 2 a.m. according to the clock in the car, right? Which does not happen in Anchorage. In Kotzebue, it totally happens, because
Right,
it's 24
exactly.
hours of sun in
Yeah,
the summer
there's
there.
no notice of the clock, right?
But here, like I sort of played with, like
Yeah.
any filmmaker, you're fudging reality anyway, and so I just took some liberties there.
Yeah, but don't
That's
blame
awesome.
Scott on this, because it's daylight around here in the summer all the time. But as we're going along with this film, the conflict is rising. The mother character does show up, and there's definitely been some history between the mother and her daughter, Jennifer.
Yeah, and Russell.
And then
Yeah.
Russell, of course, who I have a feeling the mother
Just never liked.
has never liked. And under
Yeah.
your interpretation of the Russell character, yeah, the mother's probably right.
Yeah, the mother, does not appreciate this guy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But there's a sequence when you think maybe Jennifer is gone for good because she, I don't remember the exact scene, but she goes away and her body explodes. And then you've been setting up this bringing Jennifer back character by taking her hair out of her brush.
Right.
And so he is throwing that brush away and
Yeah.
almost like, okay, I'm not going to bring her back anymore. And that's
Right.
just the end of it. But then the mother character comes over and, oh, where's my daughter? She hasn't
Right.
been calling me, or I've been calling her. You haven't been answering my call. Oh, she's upstairs, blah, blah, blah. And then turns out, oh, yeah, she really is upstairs.
She is upstairs, yeah.
But now she's much different than what you've seen before. I'm going to say not only more aggressive, maybe physically, but also sexually. She's dressed much more provocatively, has makeup on, things like that. Basically comes down the stairs, says essentially, Mother, you need to need to be on your way. Everything's
kicks her
fine.
out.
We'll maybe have you over for dinner sometime. And then we come to a pretty intense scene as we go forward. I'll let you explain that.
Yeah, it's like,
Major spoiler coming.
Oh,
well, part of our podcast is like we definitely encourage all your listeners to watch the movie before, because we'll definitely talk about the movie in detail and definitely reveal spoilers for sure.
Yeah, I probably should have gave a spoiler warning on this one because this movie is new. It came out, May of this year, right? And so
Yes.
normally we'll do that spoiler ahead of time, but most people who listen to our podcast know they better have seen the movie before they hit play.
You can put it in the title, spoiler warning,
Yeah,
spoiler alert.
definitely. We'll do that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. But they get into an argument. I think after the mom leaves, they're in an argument, and then Jen, Russell, I think, is unappreciative of Jen's newfound, I don't know, what do you say? It's some like in-your-faceness, maybe?
And potential for
So-
independence, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, he starts to, I guess he decides it's time to choke you. And so he starts to choke her. And then, of course, she breaks free of that, and she gives him a kick to the chest. And then he flies backwards, and then you hear like a horror movie, definitely a horror movie, like cracking sound, like like maybe vertebrae or something's cracking, and then he collapses to the floor and he's dead.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess a question is I just kept wondering is like, well, how did he die actually there? Because would that be an actual thing that would kill a person?
All good questions.
Yeah. But I appreciate, again, you're not spelling it all out for us, and I like that definitely as an audience member, because it just makes you think about things, you know.
Yeah, I will say in total honesty that I wished I would have done that a little better. I mean, there's always things you look back on and I wish that I would have shot this better or whatever, more coverage, blah blah blah.
Uh-huh.
But and that's obviously a super important scene.
Yes, yes.
So yeah, it was one of those situations where trying to translate what was written on the page just did not work.
Right.
So we had to kind of improvise and figure out what would work. But in retrospect, that scene should have. I mean, I like the scene and what it delivers from the actors. I think the actors do a great job in that scene.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotion for sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and you could all
they
feel it
convey
too when we were shooting it. I mean, they
convey
both
it
did
well.
a great job.
Yeah.
As with all the actors, I felt really happy with. But as a technician and as a filmmaker, I mean, I wish I would have done a better job for that specific moment. Because it is a little unclear, and I do get teased. My own kids tease me about that. Death by shove, is more.
I don't know. Yeah.
One of my daughters created
Well,
a
but
meme about it, but
That's awesome.
One of the interpretations, though, that I was thinking is if she is being continually reincarnated by this house, whatever this entity is, is her strength increasing? Does she actually have
It goes
kind
along
of an
with it, yeah.
otherworldly strength now, which allows her to get rid of whatever obstacle is in her path? In this case, this guy preventing her, because he's trying to physically stop her from leaving, because he's like, no, I've been bringing you back to life,
Yeah, he
and
confesses,
I'm
yeah.
not doing it anymore, and if you leave this property line, and she's like, you're insane, and then, kind of with the help of the entity that has rebuilt her body numerous times, she's got that force to allow him to be killed by
Mhm.
what seems like something that shouldn't kill you.
Right, because
You
she
know.
has such great strength. Good.
But
I
then
like
this
that.
this leads us to really why I think, Danielle, your character is so pivotal in this film, because the whole movie we've been like, well, one, can we get more of the Jen character? But two, now we understand why we don't get more of the Jen character in this film, because Jennifer then walks out. She's going to test Russell's theory. Can I actually leave the property line? She doubles over in
Right.
pain, gets back
She
to her
can't
property
leave the
line.
property.
And then who's across the street on another property line? Well, it's your character.
Yeah, it's Jenna.
Danielle.
It's Jen.
And you're just standing there, I think.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Longingly looking.
Yes.
Yeah.
just to feel the asphalt in my toes, right?
Yeah. I had a little flash of the film The Prestige.
Mhm.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
And certainly Pet Cemetery, also the short story with the monkey paw.
Oh, yeah.
Moments of that, of when she's coming back, what exactly is coming back, and good or bad or different, how is that affecting her and him? And like physically, certainly, but psychologically as well. So all of those things that even start, I certainly was thinking about it, even now, months later.
Oh, well, good.
Which I think is a good thing for for a movie to be able to do. You're thinking about and in terms of Russell. Well, what would you do? When do you say is enough? When is too much?
Yeah.
All those things. Was he really doing it because he loved her? And where is that? What does that look like in terms of his arc? From where
Right.
he begins and where he ends.
Right. You can make the argument that he's doing all that for his experiments, for his literary
For his
pursuits.
book,
And does
yeah.
he really
Book,
love her?
sure.
Like that unconditional love we all want to have and feel,
Mhm.
Yeah. But I thought your line there at this moment in the movie was kind of like the creepiest line of the whole
Mhm.
movie,
That she knows, and it's well, we have to just accept. At least here we are. Is it better to be alive and to be under a thumb, or to you don't have freedom, you don't really have your life, but you're alive. Is
Yeah.
that better than?
Yeah.
That's something interesting to think about as well.
Well,
Yeah.
and it was interesting too. One, the shot composition there is beautiful because it's a longer, kind of a longer shot where you can see the road and then both characters on their own property lines kind of talking to each other.
Yeah, and it's clear that even though there are no physical barriers, we are definitely trapped.
Oh, for
Mhm.
sure.
Oh yeah, you're trapped.
Yeah.
But
You're
I
trapped.
think, Danielle, what you were saying about it's better to, at least we're alive or whatever, I think it resonates a lot with the Jennifer character because she was facing a situation where I'm not going to be alive and there's nothing I can do to stop it, right? And I don't have any backstory on what your character had to deal with, but her, maybe it almost is better to be alive because I was going to be dead for sure. And it's not like I'm a 20-year-old person who's perfectly healthy going through this, and now I'm stuck on my property line, you know.
Mhm.
And so it would have been maybe interesting to get more introspection with the Jennifer character about that. But
Mhm.
no, I just think that's a brilliant scene, great scene.
Yeah, it was cool.
Beautifully shot, so just really neat. But this leads us then to the conversation. Well, Jennifer now decides she's going to drag Russell's corpse down into the attic,
Right.
but then,
Yep.
or down into the crawl space, but then who knocks on the door? It's the publisher.
It's the publisher,
you
yeah.
know? And this
yeah.
again leads to more understanding
Seward.
of how this reincarnated character is also kind of losing parts of their memory because she does not recognize who this person is,
Right.
even though she clearly should know who that person is.
Right. Right. And there are memories that she should know, but she doesn't know.
Mhm. Yeah, and so she invites him in, and they're talking about the book that Russell's writing, and oh, where is he at? Oh, he's out doing something.
Right.
Hey, and all this stuff, but then the publisher guy, I think, starts to realize that okay, something's off here, and because Jennifer is basically saying, you know, I can finish the book and
Right.
all this stuff, and oh,
And she definitely has a tone when she says that. Yeah. And so yeah, yeah. It's his reaction is probably how anyone would react. It's like, oh, I'm kind of not welcome here.
Mhm.
This is probably time for me to go.
Yep, and that's what
Yeah.
he
And so he
does.
bolts out of there.
Well, she's acting weird, you know.
Mhm.
There's also another obnoxious close-up. I don't know if you caught that of her leg.
Right.
Yeah,
He
and there's
notices, you
no
know.
tattoo. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
right. He notices there's no tattoo. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he knew. I mean, he was obviously in it the whole time with this, with the Russell character. You know, he helped front the money to buy this property.
Right.
And
They
all this
knew
stuff.
something
so they
about
both knew.
this property. Yeah.
And earlier in the film, there was a phone conversation between Russell and the publisher where it's like, I don't know if I can do this. Oh, you need to do this and
Yeah.
stuff. So they were both in on it, and so he was getting the heck out of Dodge before something more crazy happened there.
Yeah. He didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah. And so then this leads us to the climactic sequence here where Jennifer is maybe thinking, I maybe have a way out of this, maybe a way
Right.
off this property line. I just
Right.
need to basically kill this house. And so
Right.
there's a nice sequence where she's dragged Russell's body down, put him on the spot, the azote spot.
Yep.
And then what does she do? She's got the biggest dang syringe I've
Yeah, I
ever
was wondering,
seen.
it's like, where did you guys get
And
this
a
syringe?
giant bottle.
Target, I think.
What would you use something like that for? It's
I think
like
this is a turkey baster. You know, it's a you pump
It's a turkey
a big
baster.
bird full of broth or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, she pumps the body full of bleach. That's
Yeah.
what she does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so, she does that, pumping that body full of bleach.
Yeah,
And-
which is right there. You kind of link that scene to the very beginning of the movie because the very beginning, Russell is cleaning the bathroom with what?
Mhm.
With bleach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
it was interesting at the beginning. He had a respirator on.
Mhm.
So it made me think of like when I use bleach, I don't use a respirator. Right? You know,
Right.
I don't know. You think
Yeah.
of these weird things.
Yeah.
But
then-
yeah, and you highlighted the word danger on it on the bleach.
Yeah, I was a little sad that I ended up shooting that as a pickup shot, the close up of that label, but the whole label actually says harmful if swallowed. And so, which
Nice.
means more, but you can't. I mean, obviously, it's so fast you can't see it. But I
Mhm.
mean, if you've ever seen a bottle of bleach, they'll say that, right, or ammonia or
Right,
whatever,
exactly.
household chemical.
Yeah.
So that sort of played in as well.
And so
Nice.
then the crawl space, the house kind of devours that body.
Right. Yeah, and the whole bleach thing, I was kind of thinking was like kind of symbolic for like what do you use bleach for? Right? It's like it's a cleaning agent.
Cleansing.
Yeah, it cleanses
Purifying.
things.
This
All
house
that.
is-
Yeah.
This house is
So-
clean, yeah. there
Yeah,
you
this
go.
house is clean. Yeah, nice poltergeist moment. Yeah. So she's kind of going. Well, she wants to maybe cleanse the house, you know,
Mhm.
and so she injects the body full of bleach, and of course the house swallows the body. Kind of is like, I'm taking your sacrifice, kind of like that,
Mhm.
and then she can leave the house. She
Well,
leaves
but
the
there's
house.
there's I think an interesting scene right before she does that though, because then
Yeah, she has a vision.
well, but then it's also cutting to her putting makeup on, re-piercing her ears because the entity had obviously
Yeah,
sealed
filled
up
the
her-
little- yeah.
filled the holes because that's an imperfection or whatever. But then as she's walking down the stairs, she goes through some convulsions. Right? Do you remember
Right,
that?
Yeah, of course.
Right, and I'm thinking, okay, is this, because my thought was she's experiencing now what the house is experiencing as it's eating this bleach, right? And she's now got to kind of overcome purge herself of that bleach because she's part of the house, right? And the fact that she was then going through those spasms and things like that and then seems to get through it, right? And
Yeah.
then she was able to leave because she had, I think, completely freed herself from that house, even though she's going to be forced to live in whatever that final form that house gave her was.
Yeah, well, that's how she lives the rest
And
of her life.
luckily,
Yeah.
the director's right here. Am I
Yeah.
anywhere near?
You're so near. Roger.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I kind of didn't know what to make of that scene. Yeah. So I just you watch a movie in some parts you don't understand, but you just roll with it, you know. So that's I didn't catch what you really were getting at there, but you're.
No,
I
that
mean,
was
it's
my
fine.
that was my
It's
that was
fine.
my interpretation.
No,
of
that's a
kinda
great
what it
intro. I didn't
was,
think of that. I think that's
purging.
great.
And so,
Yeah,
because
I
then
think
the
it's really
next
great.
the next scene is the last scene we see of Danielle's character, and really the last scene of the movie, is Jennifer pulls out, drives out, stops kind of right at the property line of your house, and you're
I think-
amazed that she's in
Yeah,
the
I
car.
think the scene actually starts. She's in the car and she's in the street already.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then I love that Jenna, you're. It's funny. I just called you by your character name. But so
Effective acting, right?
Yeah, but you're reading a book outside on these there's some large decorative rocks in your yard, and you're reading a book. But you obviously quickly you realize what in the heck is happening, and you're just shocked.
Mhm.
And you can tell I don't think you don't say anything.
If you look close, there's a single tear.
Oh. Wait, is there really? No.
Oh, yeah.
There is? Oh. I'll look closer.
What was the name of that book? You were reading a.
I was just going to mention
Oh,
that.
yeah.
We specifically picked a very particular book off the shelf, and I think it was, I don't recall the title, but it was something about reincarnation or
Oh, was it? I
copies
thought it was
of
Transformation. I thought it was called
Transformations.
Transformation or something like that.
something
yeah.
like that.
Did you
yeah.
pick that book? I don't think we said.
Yeah, we picked it.
Okay,
Marnie and I
okay,
picked it.
okay. That's Marnie, my wife. She's mentioning there's
Nice.
That's
Nice.
big
awesome.
supporter of the movie. Thanks, Marnie.
Well, and then that's
Yeah, because-
basically the end of the film.
Yeah,
right
and
there.
you're shocked because it's like, well, what in the heck? She shouldn't be able to leave the property, and clearly she's leaving the property.
Yeah.
But then
Big
it just,
moment.
yeah, it is a big moment because then she's free. But then it's like such a great tragedy for your character because it makes you think about you and well, what's the future for your character?
Mhm.
But your future is somewhat bleak. You don't know the backstory there, but your future's not good.
Well, she sort of more accepted her fate, I think, and kind of stopped fighting. She's reading books on the lawn because she knows she can do that. She knows that she's trapped. But I like to think in my world somewhere, or in my head at least, that she is inspired by seeing that, and maybe is inspired to fight some more and to free herself.
Yeah,
even if she
yeah.
doesn't know what that looks like yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. She's inspired to
Like
explore.
it's possible.
Right. It
Yeah,
must be
what
out
is
there.
possible, yeah.
Right.
Well, and Danielle, you were mentioning earlier that you weren't the biggest horror film fan. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I can't imagine anyone not being a big horror film fan.
Yeah, and this
Um,
movie, I think, falls under the horror genre for sure. Yeah.
Certainly. Well, earlier when we were speaking, I was just talking about that growing up, I wasn't a huge scary movie fan. I had an overactive imagination and very vivid dreams, so I didn't need help visualizing the scary stuff. What I would see in my imagination and my dreams and my nightmares was, I think, scarier than sometimes than a lot of practical stuff that you would see.
Yeah.
So I didn't need the help of the visuals.
Yeah.
So I didn't watch a lot of scary movies. But more recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, I've been catching up a lot and watching a lot of the classics. And, have some new favorites even. And it's interesting coming from an actor standpoint where I'm supposed to be focusing on one thing. And I'll find myself thinking of something else completely, like, oh, I wonder how many takes they had to do for that.
Yeah.
Well, like, how,
So many
this special
takes.
effect, or right, this special effect, or, I'm noticing something completely else that probably doesn't make sense, but yeah, I've been enjoying the genre more and more. We were just talking about A24 and The Witch, and
Yeah.
I've been watching some more of the classics as well, and even have some favorites now. So it's been fun to.
My understanding, Danielle, is speaking of the classics, you have yet to actually watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre, though.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, we reviewed this
Yes.
just last week, wasn't it?
We did that 2
Yeah.
weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
But
that's
but Danielle,
correct.
I really love that point you just brought up. Is that your imagination is greater than oftentimes what you would see, you know.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think a lot of the better horror movies, are like that. Like the director makes choices and they don't show everything because I think
Mhm.
they realize that your imaginations can often be more vivid and more scary, than if you just show it.
Sure.
I think there are some movies that definitely fall in that category.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
things that you're thinking about months later, or
Yeah.
days, weeks, months later, that make you uncomfortable and that make you sit in your own skin and think about it and decide. We were just talking about Night of the Living Dead. How would you respond? Who's the monster? Man versus man. Man versus monster. Who's the monster? All of those really interesting things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's definitely one of my definitions of horror is that it affects you deeply, and it makes you a little uncomfortable in your own skin. It makes you somehow maybe even doubt your own choices.
Mhm.
I think horror movies can do that. So and I think
Yeah.
this movie touches on that. Yeah, for sure.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's why I really appreciate Bad Bones is, there's a lot going on, a lot more than you think is going
Oh,
on
yeah,
in this
yeah,
film
yeah.
is going on.
Definitely.
Give it a watch twice, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Heck, watch it 3 times.
Oh, yeah,
Make it
watch it
4.
3 times.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's on Amazon Prime right now you can rent it for $1.95. So I've rented it twice. Scott, what sort of deal do you get from Amazon? I mean, how much of my money did you get? A
Yeah.
penny?
Um,
A tenth of a cent?
well, I haven't received any money from Amazon. I think it's quarterly, so it just popped up on Amazon. I actually go through Film Hub, which is a kind of a distribution platform. Anybody can upload their movie to Film Hub, and as long as you meet their quality control,
Yeah.
then they.
Well, I saw you drive up in that Lamborghini.
Did you?
No,
I had a hard time getting out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nice for indies, especially because you don't have to go through any contract negotiations. It's a straight 80-20 split.
Mhm.
They take
Okay.
20% of whatever money is earned, and they have a dashboard. You can check your earnings and blah blah blah. And so I think I'm pretty sure Amazon takes 50% of their rentals, and then so if it was a $2 rental, I guess I'm getting 80 cents.
Okay.
from that,
Well, you got a
so.
$1.60 from me then.
Oh,
so-
thank you.
so-
Yeah. Me too.
But-
Times
Yeah.
2.
Scott, do you
Appreciate it.
are you in the director's chair for another movie here soon, or doing anything?
Yeah, I'm
now?
working on
Yeah,
another
what's-
screenplay.
What's your
Actually,
next movie?
what's my next movie? Well, there's sort of an interesting scenario that's arisen is because the two guys that I wrote the movie with, Jared Beck and Eric White. Jared was also the cinematographer on this movie. And again, I've had a relationship with them since grad school. I've known them for 10 years. So I was really grateful when they actually decided
And
to
if I
come
could
up.
ask, what grad school did you go to?
University of Central Arkansas is
Nice.
where I went to film school, which is
Awesome.
it was probably a lesser known program, but it's
Mhm.
also more affordable than say USC or
Right.
NYU.
Yeah,
or
USC,
so.
yeah.
And I had there's always a big debate on the internet about, should I go to film school or not? I have no regrets going to film school. And this is evidence of one reason why is that you develop these relationships
Mhm.
and you interact with people that are more skilled than you in certain
Right.
areas. And Jared is one, Eric is one, as well as everybody I worked with here in Alaska. But anyway, so kind of the deal was I wanted to make this feature, and they wanted to help me. And so the idea next was to work on one of their screenplays that they were going to direct. And Jared was actually working on a post-apocalyptic Western that he was going to shoot in Louisiana. But certain things happened where he wasn't able to shoot it this year. So I said, well, I don't want to, I got this window it looks like probably after Thanksgiving now that I'll be able to shoot another movie. So originally I started writing a science fiction thriller. But as I'm writing it, I'm realizing there's no way I'm going to have the pre-production time to get this off the ground or the money. So I'm sort of taking probably a smaller. I have access to a couple locations here in town that I'm trying to write movies around to shoot. So that's probably what I'll be doing. But it'll probably also be in sort of the kind of a hybrid genre, sci-fi, horror, mystery, sort of what I seem to be gravitating. I'm a big Twilight Zone fan.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
When I was a kid, PBS was rerunning all the old Twilight Zone episodes uncut, with no commercials, and
That's awesome.
and so I saw every episode and just fell in love with that show. And it's really interesting how that show is, I think, the most influential television show ever made as far as sci-fi goes. I think it used to be Star Trek, but in Twilight Zone stories used to be kind of outliers, but now that it's mainstream. I mean, they're everywhere, and so I sort of moved away from that in the past and made more like straight up science fiction. It's like short films and things like that. But I think now I've sort of embraced. I mean, this movie I think is evidence of that. I think is that even though it's probably a little more nebulous than your standard Twilight Zone episode, there's more to mill around in your brain as far as what's going on. But yeah, so I'm always working on something,
Right.
and hopefully I get to work with Danielle again. And
All right.
Yeah,
Is-
we definitely want to see Danielle
Yeah,
in your
definitely.
next
Yeah,
one.
everybody mentions that character. They really love Jenna, and so I have a coworker who says you need to put her in a movie. You need to give her a bigger part.
Well, and
I like
maybe-
this coworker
I don't know,
very much.
maybe it's Bad Bones 2, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because people have
The
asked me, "Well, are you
Salvation
going to
of
make
Jenna.
are you going to make a sequel? Are you going to make a sequel?" And
Yeah.
I was like, if I were to do that, which might happen, I don't think I would follow Jenna's character
Oh.
or the previous owner because it would be the same movie. It would be the same story. And one thing I really don't like about sequels is traditionally they just rehash the original movie. So what I would probably do is follow Jen away from the house and what happens to her, because that would be different. It's
Yeah,
almost
no,
like, it's
it's-
almost
it's
like the
both.
ending of Ex Machina. When she leaves at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you wonder, well, what happens now? To her.
Well, she goes to the intersection in New York City. Yeah.
To people
yeah.
watch.
Yeah, right.
It's
so
great you
to
brought
me,
that-
ending.
to me, that would be way more interesting. I mean, not that I don't like Jenna, because I do. I love that character, and everybody loves that character. But I think it wouldn't make for an interesting movie as far as if I were to continue the story. So, but the odds of that happening are also slim because I know like Madison's price is probably
Oh.
her stock is increasing as we speak. So
Yeah,
Yes.
she did a great job in
Yeah,
this
she
film.
did.
We didn't really talk enough about her acting skill, but the fact that she had to play multiple versions of the same character
and
Yeah.
while being sick.
and being so
Right,
good.
yeah.
which is
Yeah.
which is
She's wonderful.
interesting because like I said, she lost her voice, and so I had to ADR certain scenes because everything was shot out of order. I'm sorry, actors.
Yeah.
So they kind of it's just
And that's typical, right? To shoot.
it depends. Yeah, it depends. I mean, like for example, like my wife had requested, because she works from home, and so she works out of
Oh.
her bedroom, and she has an office in there, and she said, "Can you do all the bedroom scenes in one day so that I'm not kicked out of my office all the time?" And I said, "Of course," and so that in and of itself means we were, compacting all of those scenes. And I know Chris had said, everybody had a screenplay, obviously, but he said at the end of the movie, like he didn't know what this was going to look like or what it was going to be about, because even as an actor, it was all so disjointed.
Right.
And so, I mean, obviously, as an editor, it's your job to, make it cohesive,
Yeah.
Right.
best of your ability.
That's where
And
the
again,
work-
and then I was also working with my friends that, they would look at the cuts and give me feedback, and we'd move scenes around and do all that stuff. So,
No, that's great.
so collaboration is king.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Type of thing.
And then
Don't try and do it by yourself.
Right.
Yeah. But a follow-up question to that is like,
Yeah.
how do you, as the director, how do you prepare your actors for shooting a scene that's out of sequence? Because your actors may not know,
How they're supposed to be
Yeah,
feeling and what
yeah,
version.
yeah.
Well, you do a lot of preparation. I mean, the more you can never prepare enough. But I mean, you have discussions with the actors and don't leave them in the dark if you can at all help it. Unless that's something you're going for, if you want them to be confused, or that's a viable emotion sometimes.
Right. Right.
But we had a lot of discussions previously before. And I mean, we also, when you shoot out of sequence like that, you also have to make sure, like with costuming, that you have your ducks in
Right,
a row,
right.
because you're going to
Continuity.
cause continuity problems later. And those happen. A couple of those did happen. But I don't think anything derails the movie as a
No.
result of
No,
that.
I
I think
didn't
that,
really notice. You guys did a good job.
no, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it was definitely a group effort.
And
So
then
there lots of
Danielle, what's next for you? What new horror movie can we expect to see you in?
Well, I've got some irons in the fire. Always looking for new projects. But that one that Scott mentioned that's in post right now, the I Die You Live, that was a really fun feature to do with Rocket Joe
Yeah.
Films.
I'm actually the editor
Joe
of that
Hamilton.
movie now.
Are you really?
nice.
No kidding.
Yeah,
Hey.
yeah.
Well, and
Is this
I'm loving
coming-
that. I'm loving that title already.
Yeah.
It's a good title.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Is this coming
so-
out soon?
I don't have a time frame, Scott.
I think it's next year.
Next
Next
Yeah.
year.
Awesome.
I actually haven't started working on it, but Joe asked me to work on it because I guess he had an editor that moved or something, and so
Oh, okay.
he's short an
So
editor.
Awesome.
There's an Anchorage Film Festival opening soon, so you don't have any things in that?
I did submit Bad Bones to the Anchorage International Film Festival, but they're sort of not thrilled that it's online right now. Even though in their requirements they don't mention online distribution, they mention broadcast. And I think they kind of want to be like the premiere, of whatever movies they are debuting, and so I mean that's just not going to happen. So it's sort of up in the air at the moment. But
Okay.
they were concerned, like, well, can you basically put butts in seats if it's already been online and everybody's seen it? And I was like, well, not everybody's seen it.
No.
Even locally, I think we only had about 80 people come to the premiere. So I told them I think we could get the word out. I mean, considering that when Bad Bones was being made and when it premiered, not everybody really knew who I was or what I was doing. I think more people know now,
Yeah.
a little bit more. So hopefully that helps. But I think, we can definitely get the word out. But I know, who knows?
Yeah.
They haven't gotten back to me yet.
Well,
I know
and
that's
Yeah.
Hopefully
well-
our little podcast can help
Yeah,
a
our
little bit.
listenership
Yeah.
increases every
Yeah,
week.
You guys are on Spotify.
We're on
We
Yeah,
are
on
on
lots of
Pan-
streaming
Pandora,
platforms.
Spotify. We're on Amazon.
Castbox,
We're all
yeah.
over the place.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, and outside of the Amazon viewings, YouTube, we're almost at 200,000
That's true. Yeah.
views, so it's
Yeah.
Nice.
increasing steadily.
Well, that's awesome.
Great.
Go Bad Bones.
Well,
Yeah.
Scott, thank you so much
Well,
for
thank you
coming
for
in
having
today.
me, yeah.
This is it's been our honor to have
Yeah,
you, and
yeah.
Danielle, certainly an honor to have you as well. I really appreciate you coming in. I hope we did okay, right?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And
Yeah.
no, you guys are great. I hope.
No, this is probably the most in-depth conversation I've had about the movie, so it's been
Well, and
enjoyable, yeah.
I appreciate that because I really do, for all the listeners out there, you need to see this movie. And if it does get into the Anchorage Film Festival, you need to go
Yeah,
and see it
you
when
need
it's
to see it.
playing on the big screen. This movie is smart, well-crafted. See it twice, right? I missed a lot of the cool stuff that's going on in this movie the first time I watched it, and it wasn't until I saw it the second time that I realized how smart this movie is and how subtle a lot of the things are. Or if nothing else, watch it for Danielle's hilarious, awesome
Yes.
first scene in the movie. So,
Hey, it's a
Oh,
comedy.
job.
yeah, well, it's just really off-putting and great. And so, yeah, Bad Bones, check it out. If you want to see it now, it's on Amazon Prime for rental.
Right.
Gene, any final thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great movie. It's cool. It's living in Anchorage. It's cool to see something that's local. It's really great. It's good to see people like just going for it. Trying to live out the dream. So it's cool. Yeah, let's support this movie.
Great. All right. That's all we got for today. We'll check in next week. I think we're doing Blair Witch Project
Blair
next
Witch,
week. We
yeah.
lied and said we were doing it this week.
Yeah, we
but
lied. We said we were
got
gonna do
this
Blair
out.
Witch this week.
You didn't have the filmmakers on for that one?
Well,
Oh,
we
wish.
put up,
Oh, that'd be great.
They did not return our calls.
Oh,
so,
man.
but we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Later.